If we think about time and think about like the synchronicities of life, what if it all really is connected and where you are going in the future has already happened, but we're just experiencing it from our human experience because we measure time in a specific way.
I got love for the game. Bring it back to the golden age when the fresh beats knocked down. Whatever happened to real hip hop? Love for the game.
So we are live. We got my good friend Mike Schauer here. For the listeners who don't know, Mike Schauer, he's a copywriter. He has swiped.co. He created that himself, but he's also deep in a lot of the conspiracies that we talk about here on this channel, Raw and Relentless. So welcome, Mike.
Yes, thank you for having me, man. I know this is going to be good.
Yeah, man, of course. I've been looking forward to this for a while. You are literally the first of like 5 that we're filming this week, so we can get ahead of the schedule on this. But I'm looking forward to it because I know, like, just between you and I, we've hung out at different events and stuff, and I feel like we relate on a lot. And also, you're like one of the uncasted members of the Jersey Shore that nobody knows about.
I'm in the bonus episodes. You got to pay to see those.
Got it. Behind that paywall, the OnlyFans.
Right. Yeah, me and my girlfriend will talk about that sometimes, that we could have probably tried out and made it on the show. I mean, yeah. I'm originally from New York, but most of the people that are actually Snooki is from the area that I lived in for a while, Poughkeepsie in upstate New York. So most people don't know that a lot of the members aren't from Jersey.
Really?
And meanwhile, the people that aren't familiar with Jersey, they often associate New Jersey with people that are kind of from New York. But it's the same. It's the same flavor, man. It's the same.
I feel like I don't want to add in what I was going to say. I was like, is Jersey in New York? Because I'm the worst at geography, bro.
Oh, well, dude, I'm on the Hudson River, and I see New York, but I'm in New Jersey. So just to confuse you even more, that's where I live. I'm right in the middle of your confusion.
Got it. So it's literally just separated by a river.
Yeah, like the New York City. If I just walk a few feet, I could see New York City.
Oh wow.
But I don't need to be in the city. Like, I'm good. I'm only 20 minutes away if I just drive my car in or take an Uber or something. So I'm fine being out here, taking it a little bit easier. It's not like it's desolate over here, but it's a little bit of a break.
I've only been in New York once, and this just goes to show how much I was paying attention, because now that you say that, I do remember being on one of those boat tours, and they're like, that's Jersey, this is New York.
Yeah, and they probably said Jersey in a very derogatory way, like, yeah, it's New Jersey.
Yeah.
I love it here, though.
Is there like a big difference in the demographic? Like, you just go over the bridge and immediately it's a difference, or what?
Oh, dude, like, what's so great about this area, about New York, about New Jersey, and I'm originally from New York and I've lived in different areas, but everywhere I've gone, what I really love about, New York, New Jersey is the melting pot aspect of it. And I know that other cities, they have that to an extent, but dude, nothing compares to New York, New Jersey. If you were here and I'm like, let's take a half-hour drive, we would be in areas where there would be Dominicans, Cubans, Colombians. There's a huge Korean area. A bunch of Italians used to live here. My girlfriend is Cuban. There was a huge Cuban community. And then you go into, like, there's a big Turkish community. And of course, all those places, they have really good restaurants too. So you get to enjoy, like, the flavors of that culture, and then forget it. If you go into New York, it's the same thing. So I think that was a big part of, like, my own upbringing and what allows me to connect with different people. Like, people would definitely benefit from being in an area like that, at least for a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like if I was single, man, I would love to live in New York. But when I visited, I'd already been in a relationship with my girl. So I was like, damn, there's a lot here that I feel like I won't ever get to enjoy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess you're saying from, like, a single standpoint.
Yeah. The nightlife alone, like, I didn't get the chance to go out to any of the nightlife in New York, which I really want to, but I was also there with my mom. So that's part of the reason why. And that blew my mind, bro. Like when you said there's that Korean community, like literally we walked in to that because she's Korean. So we had to go to the Koreatown. Is that what they call it? Koreatown?
Well, they're in New York. So New York, in the city that's more so known for Chinatown, there's Korean pockets, but the real, like the biggest Korean area is in New Jersey. But a lot of people don't know about that. It's like right over the bridge when you're coming from New York. But yeah, anyway. Dang. So you saw some Koreans in New York? Like
yeah, man, we went there like 2 or 3 times. My mom made us go. So we had to go eat Korean barbecue in New York City. If she knew the best spot for Koreans was in Jersey, we probably would have gone to Jersey because she loves Korean barbecue.
Yes, dude, Korean barbecue. So I'm kind of a rookie to Korean barbecue. I never fully, I got a little turned off this one experience I had because I don't know, for whatever reason, I feel like people in certain cultures, Hispanics too, they don't mind eating fatty meat. Maybe it's more of an American thing where I don't like to eat too much fat. And sometimes the place I went to was just so fatty where I just felt like I was eating pieces of fat. And meanwhile, you see everyone around me seemingly fully enjoying what they're eating.
Yeah.
But that was just one experience I had. I also got a little bit turned off. This was funny because my girlfriend, she'll have tofu and stuff sometimes. I'm not really into that. And outside of this one place I went to, I saw them bringing in buckets of tofu. Like in fucking buckets.
Yeah.
And you just see this jiggling substance inside of buckets. It's like, how is this appetizing? And meanwhile, that's put in a lot of different things. So if I go to Korean barbecue, I have to be very particular about what I order.
Do you remember what you were eating at the Korean barbecue place?
No, this was a while ago. It was something reminiscent of some kind of spare rib or something like that, some kind of short rib.
Got it.
Something of that sort.
I think I know what you're talking about now. It's kalbi, and it's got like the 3 bones in it. Is that what I'm?
Oh, so that's probably it. Yeah.
It definitely has a lot of fat on there, but man, does it taste so good.
Yeah.
There's this other stuff that you got to try. It's called bulgogi, and it's like steak sliced. It's like the beef and stuff. And it's just like little pieces of steak, but they marinate it overnight. And my mom makes her own marinade because she's like fresh off the boat Korean. And she's like, the secret ingredient is kiwi juice because it just makes it so juicy and tender when you cook it. And so, yeah, man, maybe you just need to go with the right people.
Yeah, that's totally what I need to do. Absolutely.
So did you feel like everybody was like enjoying it and then you were sitting there just like trying to enjoy it, but then acting like you enjoyed it when you really weren't?
Yeah, well, I never really act that I'm enjoying something, but at the same time, I enjoyed the experience of just experiencing something new. It's like when you go to a new country and you may feel completely out of place and like you may not be enjoying something, but at the same time, it's like, this is pretty fucking cool because I've never had this particular type of experience before. So it's just when you have, and this is another thing in New York, New Jersey area, dude, there's so many good places to eat. So when you have so many places to eat, like there has to be someone like you that comes to visit me or is like, dude, let's go out for Korean. And that kind of nudges me back in that direction. So then I get back into it again because otherwise there's so much selection. Like, why would I try that place again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever hang out with Brandon Carter over there in New York City?
I've met with him a few times. Yeah, I mean, we're friends. I don't hang out with him that much, but yeah, he's like in Midtown.
Yeah.
I've been to his spot before.
Yeah, I mean, since I've only been there once, that's immediately what I thought about because like you hear about all the shit going on in the news right now and like how Times Square is empty. And literally the only way I'm keeping up with like the state of New York and what's going on over there, because I'm not watching the news. I just watch Brandon Carter's Instagram story.
Yeah. I'll watch his every once in a while.
Yeah.
I haven't been to New York in a while just because of the state of it. And with not too much open, there's really no reason to go over there. You know, I was walking around by my apartment here the other night, and I came across this couple's really nice couple, and I was just talking to them about different shit that's going on, and they're like, yeah, we're going to move to Florida now. We've been in the business, the club business. We've been operating nightclubs and stuff for a while.
In New York?
Yeah, in New York. I don't know. Have you ever heard of the Copacabana?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this was like a really old club, like old school club back in the day that used to be mafia owned.
Okay.
But they, I guess, somehow got involved with it and bought it afterwards and moved it to Times Square. And this guy owned it for like 20 years. It was an African-American couple. 20 years they owned it. And he's like, they just said, screw it, because they were like, it's not the same. And I guess because the rent is so high, they didn't even want to bother. So he said he's going to open up a club in Florida on the water, and he figures that'll be a good bet for him.
Yeah. So is this kind of his response to the whole COVID thing and everything shutting down?
Yes, but also this kind of coincides with, I think, a plan that they had to move to Florida anyway, to do something like this. So it's kind of like how a lot of people right now, they're choosing to make decisions that they kind of were thinking about before, but they accelerated the decision making. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've had any instances like that, but where you were thinking about something before, and because of the situation, it like pushed it forward. It made it more important.
Yeah.
So I think that's what really happened to them, because I've seen people out lately at bars in the area, and they're packed. They're packed around here. So I don't know how much of a problem it would have been for him. I think they were looking for a reason to leave.
I feel the same way with the podcast, bro. Like I started this maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. And like the week that I started the podcast, Joe Rogan's Spotify deal happens. It was like the day I was starting to film the first episode. And so I'd already had all this stuff coming in the mail, the lights, the studio equipment, the chairs and whatnot. And this is like an idea I'd been sitting on for probably end of 2018. I was talking about how I feel like podcasts are the new wave. And then Brian Moncada, who you know, me and him were both talking about starting our own podcast literally over a year ago. And we just never bit the bullet or jumped the gun on it. And then finally, when this all happened and my business had to literally change, because my business plan this year was supposed to be, I was going to run 3 boot camps where like, these are boot camps where guys pay several $1,000s to come, and each boot camp has 30 guys there. And we had a documentary around it and everything. And I was already having 3 planned this year, and I had to cancel 2 of them and just move the guys who were already reserved for those to the one at the end of the year. And I'm still wondering if I have to move that one back, because we don't know when everything is going to open up. But I'm just trying to figure out, well, what do I do next? What do I do now, since I'm not selling out boot camps? And this podcast actually was kind of the baby of that.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I hear so many stories like that now where people finally are, and I don't think we necessarily, like our group of friends, has that problem of pulling the trigger. But this really has been a catalyst, and I've seen so many positive things come from this.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's hard for them to see past the negativity, but it's all what you choose to look at.
Yeah.
You know, I don't pay, and I'm sure, you know, we pay attention to certain news sources, but I don't really pay attention to what's going on anymore too much about current events. It's like just enough, because I feel like I find out what I need to know somehow through a friend, through parents. My parents pay plenty of attention to the news. Like I don't need to watch any news to be on top of things unless I want to be.
Yeah. I feel like now that I have a podcast, if I'm planning on this thing growing and having a huge audience one day, which I'm obviously going for, right? I almost have felt this weird, almost, what's the right word? It's not a need, but it's like an obligation to stay relevant with what's going on, because I got to be able to talk about it on my podcast. If I eventually have an audience, they might be influenced by what we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, I hear you on that. I hear you. No, I mean, it's good to, I think maybe people feel like they have to be more aware exactly of what's going on than they have to. Like what I'm thinking of is more like, yeah, I'm aware that protests are going on. I'm aware of the racism thing. I'm aware of these different things that are going on, but I don't look too deep into them, because unless I want to, unless I feel like it's relevant for me and I want to. But otherwise, I guess what I'm saying is I will look for the foundation of like what's going on and create my own spin, in a sense of like what I think is the most empowered perspective. And then maybe from there, I'll look into things, because otherwise you can fall into that trap of reading, hearing like what is the story. And then you feel like, well, that's the story, versus if you stay a little bit disconnected from it, it allows you to like be that alchemist, right? And kind of create your own spin.
Yeah.
You be the spin room, you know?
Yeah. Dude, that's interesting. So, kind of like, I feel like maybe your mentality around that, I'm curious, did you discover that through any of the copywriting that you do? Because obviously you built a whole website and everything. And with copywriting, I feel like, because I'm coaching a guy on my team who normally helps me with the podcast. He's like my marketing assistant. I'm trying to teach this guy copywriting. And it seems like sometimes he's just not getting it, but he's also really young. And I feel like sometimes if I'm writing good copy, it's because I have life experience, or I have a lot of different experiences to draw from that gives me more of the creative side to that. So you saying a little bit detached to add creativity to your own perspective, do you feel like that came from copywriting at all?
I think it's all intertwined. You know, like I'm realizing more and more, especially as I come into more of what I would say, like what I'm passionate about, and just kind of living my passion as fully as I can, is everything, for the way I see it anyway, and how I see it in other people's lives too, is things become so intertwined with each other where they become like more related than you think, you know. And that's, I think, a part of that, that is kind of like a goal, I think, in terms of living a fully realized life where you feel like everything is kind of connected. And that way it's not this part of my life and then this part of my life, and I got to work on this side of my life, where things just, yeah, there's always going to be that separation, but it just feels more intertwined, more connected. And you're able to move forward a little bit more cohesively and simply, I think. So from like a copywriting perspective, for instance, one thing that is a common thread amongst like everything that I do is I'm very much a researcher. So I'm someone that really likes to dig deep, which just goes along with, you know, you talked about conspiracy type stuff and just in general, like going into the unknown, investigating into the unknown. And so I think that makes me, and that's kind of my superpower with the copy stuff, because I can write copy. What's that?
The research is your superpower?
Research. Yeah, absolutely. That's been illuminated for me, like as I continue on this path with my site, is that the role for me to take, and which I have taken, is less of being because people always say, oh, do you take on copywriting jobs? Like, do you do jobs for other people? And I don't write copy unless it's for my own projects, unless I'm really, you know, if I'm inspired to, whatever. It's not like a hard rule. Yeah. But the reason is because I've taken on this role of being the guy that helps copywriters. And I do that by, and this ties into what you were just saying, by staying on top of what people in the industry, in different industries are doing. Yeah. Right. So I've actually, it's funny that this is kind of coming full circle with what we were just talking about. But I make it, just like you are kind of talking about, you make it a point to stay on top of certain things for your talks. I do. That's me in the copywriting world. So that way, when someone comes to me and they say, hey, I'm working on this promotion that involves this, this, and that, I'm going to then find specific examples that they can model. And that's my superpower, really. Like, there's other aspects to it, right? Like, if I wasn't a good copywriter, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to teach copy and do it in the way I do it. But if you were to separate one thing, it is that research aspect of it, and that going into the unknown, enjoying mystery, being curious. Like, I'm a super curious person. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a parallel with you then, where when it comes to what you consider to be like I guess you could say kind of like a role that you're playing, part of your role is, and it's exciting, is to stay on top of things, because you're not doing it out of like, all right, I guess I have to stay on top of things, yeah. Right? Like you're excited to do it.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it, but I'm also coming from the frame of if I don't stay on top of what's going on right now, then I'm worried that I'll just continue to talk about aliens and space.
Well, that depends on the people you get on your show.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what people want to hear, you know?
Probably.
Maybe. See, I've realized, and I'm realizing more and more, that I used to look into certain things because I felt like I had to.
Mm-hmm.
Like having, because we talked about having like varied experience is good. Having different experiences that you can draw from, it makes you more well-rounded and stuff. But that can come from a place of just exploring what you want to explore. I don't think that has to come from a place of, well, I have these specific topics that I have to stay on top of. And then you just kind of do it like, regrettably, as you're looking through stuff, saying, yeah, I should stay on top of this and this and this, but you don't even enjoy it. So, like, fuck that. Just, I don't know. It'll come together like with what you want to look into.
Yeah.
And
it'll be interesting to see how the voice of this podcast kind of evolves over time, because right now I think, especially with the current events, it has kind of, I guess, hit a little close to home. Like literally I live in downtown Phoenix right now. And when the riots were starting, they were marching down like right outside my window. Like this is a curtain right here. So like right outside this window, I could see all the marching, all the protesting. And I'm literally like, Kate, my girlfriend, she was literally like, hey, there's protests going on. There's protests going on. I'm sitting in here trying to get work done, probably filming a podcast. And we're on the verge of like going to bed. And I'm like, what are you talking about these protests? And she goes, they're right down the street. I'm watching them on Facebook right now. And she was watching a news live streaming from a helicopter. And I could hear the helicopter over me while she's saying this. And they're 2 blocks that way, just like breaking windows to office buildings and stuff. So I guess part of me staying relevant on that stuff was more just like out of necessity. So I legit almost went and bought a gun because I live in Arizona and anybody can get a gun here. And literally you can just carry it like with no license or anything, just out in the open.
Wow.
Yeah. But I didn't get a gun, or maybe I did, for all you fuckers who might want to break in. So don't test that. But yeah, man, it'll be interesting to see how things get normalized and kind of what the voice becomes of this podcast. But definitely right now, I think this is going to be the 10th episode. So 10 episodes in, probably half of it has just been talking about aliens and conspiracies.
Dude, that's fine though. That's fine. It's like, it's accepting that. And then when you change, the show changes. I think Joe Rogan, I think he's such a great role model for this podcast and just for what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because most people, they don't follow his format because they think it's got to be a certain niche and this and that. But there's something to be said for going into something and just letting it flow and like letting certain things come about. And at the end of the day, like something that I was talking about recently with someone was how like people follow people today and open up their emails and open up their stuff and like look at this based on how much they like the person, I feel. It's not based on the material or the subject line or that stuff as much. So once you find your people, and I know you already have kind of an audience, but it might change. It'll become more like you. And then I think that's the ultimate scenario, is where you just kind of let it go in the direction you want to go in. And you actually realize that there's other people that want to hear this shit that are like you, but maybe you just might be a little bit reluctant, or you don't think that there's people that want to hear that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of on that line of thinking, like, that's most of the reason why I started this podcast. Like I think I told Caleb Maddox this, who was on one of the first episodes. I was like, yo, this is the long-term plan. And I don't care if this podcast gets like shit views for a couple of years or whatever it is, because I'm going to be doing this for the next 20 years, more so because I've already experienced having a niched channel. Like you said, most people try to go into one niche. And I felt after 5 years of making hundreds of videos on that channel, it's like it's almost like, well, if I want to comment on something going on in the world, or if I want to talk about this, I can't do it because that format doesn't call for it. And so from like a fulfillment standpoint, I just felt like I wasn't able to express myself in the ways that I wanted to. And so for this podcast, it was, I mean, yeah, obviously I want to grow an audience, but it was mostly for me, you know, to be able to talk about these things, you know?
Dude, so this is actually a huge parallel for me and a big synchronicity, because this is something that I am looking into. Because as you mentioned, I have my website where I have a copywriting and marketing crowd. I want to talk about other shit. I want to do this, kind of like what you're doing. And so this is obviously it's very perfect in terms of how I'm actually getting something from this beyond just the cool conversation as well, which I'm realizing more now. I wasn't thinking about it before, but as you're talking about this is something that I'm also planning. Like, I'm writing a book and creating kind of a brand that is just more me, and it's just me on a plate, like personal development related, but it's going to include whatever else I want to talk about. It's going to be the Mike Schauer brand. And that's what I want. That's what I just want to make a living off of being me.
Yeah.
You know?
You know the name of it? Is it going to be called the Mike Schauer brand? Like big baller brand?
So, yeah, I mean, I'm still playing around with it. I registered a domain name a long time, like 5 years ago, that was called Increase the Easy. And the whole idea, and this has been a big theme for me, and there's no coincidence why I registered that then and I'm still interested in it, is because in terms of like how I live my life, it's just simplified more and more. And I don't just mean in terms of what I'm into or what I focus on or where my head is at, but in terms of like how I see how everything works in a much more simplified way, in terms of just how the universe works. And so that has been a big theme of mine. And Increase the Easy is this idea that, dude, life is hard, man. Like, it could be tough. Life is fucking tough. Like, we have a lot of challenges, right? But we can make it easier. And so it's that acknowledging that, yeah, we're always shedding skin. We're always becoming new people. And that's not easy, but it can be easier. And it's that idea of whatever that encompasses, that's kind of the direction that I'm going in.
Yeah.
So it's very open.
What does the increase imply? What does the word increase do for that brand? What does
Continuously easier. And where life just flows a lot more. I mean, that's where I'm at now, is where things just flow, because it's kind of like you're just continuously, and the way I see it is to be more of who you are. It's a shedding process. It's a releasing process. You're not like adding to yourself. You're just releasing until you like get more to your core, and you just live more simply, because you're not worried about so many different things. Your thoughts aren't being filtered through all these different beliefs that slow you down and that trip you up, you know, where you're becoming more vulnerable. Yeah. You're not holding back. You're just kind of like, this is what I want to do. And it's me putting that, basically, how do you be? So I'll tell you, the working title of the book is Becoming an Expert at Being You. So the whole idea, you like the title?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So the whole idea is kind of what I'm talking about, where it's creating a process, and it's very much a reflective work for me, where I'm going through like what I went through, but creating some kind of framework or a process where it comes back to you having the answers. And that kind of ties in as well with what I was talking about earlier, about you not falling too much into what other people are saying, and having that space to think about for yourself, to go within and say, what's my preference here? Like, what is going to serve me most here? Like, what is going to be in my best
interest?
Yeah, in my best interest, but just not even because it'll get me something else, but just because like that's what I prefer.
Yeah.
Like that's what feels aligned with me. And for me, that's looking at things in an empowered way. And what's an empowered way? It's this idea that you have the answers and that it ultimately comes back to you. And so that's what this idea of becoming an expert at being you is, where you just, it's not involving other people. Like it involves other people because we live in physical reality, but it's always like a gut check. It's always comes back to right heart gut check.
Yeah.
So,
I like a couple of things came up for me when you were talking about increase to easy and how to be an expert at being you. One, I love the title because sometimes I realize, like, especially recently, being 30 years old, I've realized me procrastinating, me getting addicted to marijuana. And I actually quit a few days ago. So I had my girlfriend lock all of it away in a place that I have no clue where it is. And she put it behind an actual lock, because I've tried to like just cut back in the past. And if it's sitting there, I'll just hit it the first time I get the chance, just out of habit. And I'm like, fuck, I broke the fucking streak. So now it's gone. And so we'll see how long that goes. I think more just because I got scared out of smoking weed after I saw a brain scan of like someone who smokes weed daily versus a healthy brain. And I was like, oh shoot. But that's up for debate. And then on the other hand, you know, you talked about this idea of life being hard and you want to make it easier. And a lot of it comes down to just you being able to manage yourself, like Peter Drucker says. And one thing, being 30 now, which is crazy to even say, I don't feel 30. I don't even think I look 30, but what
is 30 anymore, right? I'm 32. I felt the same way, dude. I felt the same way. I don't even, honestly, 30, and I don't want to break up the conversation, but when I turned 30, I didn't care about age as much, because I feel like we become very attached to our 20s.
Yeah. And
once I turned 30, I felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Like, I'm done with the 20s. Like, I'm a man now. Like, who gives a fuck about age anymore, right? And I feel like our perception of age, it's just going to continuously change, because we're able to be healthier people now. We see things differently. Like, we're becoming a new species in a sense, where it's much different. It's not the same. It's not. You can't compare 30 to our parents' 30. Like, it's just not.
And I think that actually brings back to what I was originally going to say, is like, I being a kid in my 20s or my teens, I look at my parents and I look at my friends' parents and I go, these adults, they know things. They got it figured out. They have wisdom that I don't have. But now that I'm 30, I realize, oh, most adults don't know what the fuck they're doing. Most adults are just trying to figure it out as they go, always.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the increase to easy idea, because I think that'll just really show, hey guys, let's stop making it harder on ourselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The path of least resistance, because that's a big thing that, especially, you know, those of us that became entrepreneurs, we have heard the message so much of you have to work hard, right? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that from a certain angle, because there's work involved. Like, you have to take action, right? But I feel like it can be taken too far. And in general, on a consensus level, that's been taken too far, and it creates like an imbalance. So the work hard becomes like, I'm going to fucking will this into existence. And that's not the easy way. That's the hard way. That's why they say work hard. So what is working easy? It's like finding your flow and finding, like, just dropping everything that's blocking you and allowing yourself to not try to be somebody else. Because that's what makes it hard for us usually, is when we try to be other people and other different, you know, personalities. But that's a part of our growing process. And that's why you can't say like, no, dude, it's like, it could be easy. Like, you can't technically say it could be easy, but I think easier is definitely, you could say that. It could absolutely be easier, to the point where you say, this is happening effortlessly for me, because a lot of things happen like that for me now, where things just seem to fall into place. And I would consider that easy, even though I have those times where I'm going through challenges and shit.
Yeah. So I don't know if I've ever asked you about this, but like, how did you get into entrepreneurship? Because you started your website, you built the whole thing from scratch, you coded it all, which impresses me because I'm terrible at coding. But like, how did you get into all that? Because obviously me, like I was in dental school, obviously unsatisfied where the rest of the 50 years of my life were going, and I could already see it because I was in dental school to be a dentist. So that was like kind of me just not wanting to settle for this life. What was it for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I just thought, because I was listening to Jordan Belfort recently, and he has a similar story. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. He was in dental school, and the guy says, "Yeah, so you're only going to make this much," and he just left the room.
It's funny because I heard that going into dental school, someone had told me that story about Jordan Belfort, and ironically, my first day of dental school, they did the same thing, you know? And I was like, fuck this.
Yeah, so well, I've always been entrepreneurial. And when I say that, I mean, like when I was in high school, I was selling CDs, I was selling mixtapes, I was selling candy. I kind of had this little operation going.
Yeah.
And I was just really excited about it. I mean, I made like a few $1,000s in high school just through selling CDs. I would print the cover on Amazon. I would download the music, print out a track list, tape it on the back of the printed out cover from Amazon. And then I'd put it in a clear plastic case and I'd bring it into school and I'd sell them for $5. So I was doing that for junior and senior year of high school. I wasn't playing sports in school. I was literally focused on like selling CDs, which it was more than just money, because that allowed me to connect with people. That allowed me to reach out and be friends with different people, where it like really built, I guess you could say, my network in high school, where I became friends with all different people in all different crowds that just came together for the love of mostly rap and hip hop music. You know?
Yeah. Who's your favorite rapper?
My favorite rapper? Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think.
What about
what's that?
Who was on those mixtapes back in the day?
Well, yeah, I mean, this was so I was in high school, this was 2005, 2006, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking Kanye, 50 Cent, Jay-Z, like, what's that?
Lil Wayne?
Yeah, Lil Wayne. So yeah, those artists are definitely close to my heart, especially for that era, because of my closeness to the music then and how it was like a big thing for me, a social thing as well. But yeah, obviously being from the Northeast, being from New York, New Jersey, I mean, I have a connection with East Coast rap. So Nas, Jay-Z, Jadakiss, like I love that hard hitting, but I don't always want that. It's just, it depends. I mean, I'm very eclectic with my musical taste. And my dad, he grew up like singing in a doo-wop group. So I was around oldies all the time. I love listening to oldies sometimes, just like old school jams from the 50s and 60s. But yeah, in terms of, like this area, I mean, Nas, Jay-Z.
You think Nelly would be considered oldies at this point?
Nelly? Yeah. Nelly would be 2005, 2006 for sure. That would definitely be in there. Yeah. Dipset is another. Cameron and Joel Santana. They're another New Yorker.
Old school Chris Brown music back then. I remember my MySpace page. I was so happy with myself because I created my own MySpace page, and you could choose a custom background, you could change it, you could add code for like different things you wanted to put on the page. And the first song that I had was it's the Chris Brown song.
Yeah. On the floor. Yeah. Yeah, dude. I sold that. So funny story. So I had that CD. Like, I loved that CD. I thought it was so awesome. Like, excuse me, miss.
Yeah.
Like, you don't hear that
Saturday.
Yeah. No, that was a good fucking album. I mean, obviously it got him big, right? But it was so funny because at the time, I think I sold like 1 or 2 of those because nobody knew who Chris Brown was. So I'm going around telling people, and this is one of the reasons why I like this too, is I was on top of what was hot then.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta listen, like Chris Brown. This is in terms of R&B, like this is awesome. It's fucking awesome. And I had like 2 people buy it. Whereas with 50 Cent, I think the biggest sale I ever did was 50 Cent's The Massacre. It was over 50 that I sold.
So these would be like, basically you would download the entire album and then you'd burn it to a bunch of CDs, make a bunch of copies. Would you print like the design on the CD itself too?
So I would print out from Amazon, because Amazon would usually have the cover early. So I'd print it out, and I would just stack, like, say there's 50 sheets of paper with the album cover printed out. I would take a scissor and cut them out all at once, right? Just line them all up, boom, and then I got a stack of album covers that were just pieces of paper.
Damn, you were the guy going around your high school like, hey, you want to buy this mixtape? Hey, you want to buy this mixtape? Like all those rappers hustling.
Kind of, right? Yeah, at first it was kind of like that, right? But here's what happened. And I was in a big school too. Like we had, I think, 3,000 kids together. Wow. It was huge school. It was like 800 kids just in my class.
Like a college campus to some degree.
Yeah, it was giant. So there's a lot of people, right? But what would happen is teachers started yelling in class at me and people that were looking at my CDs, because I would bring a binder and they would pass around the binder in class.
Dang.
And it, depending on what class I was in, like some classes, there were a lot of kids that wanted to see like what I had. So I didn't even have to do that much, I guess you could say, like barking in the hallways. It was more like me just building the brand. And then when I would be in class, yo, what do you got? What do you got? Pass it over here.
Yeah.
And they would just pass it around. And I would literally make money during class sometimes, where they would take the CD, put the $5 bill in the binder, and then when it comes back to me, I felt like a fucking boss, man. I was living. I mean,
at least you're doing CDs and not like Percocets and shit like that.
Yes. Yeah, like, no, I had friends, of course, that sold marijuana and stuff, so absolutely.
Yeah. How did this get you into copywriting? How did you get into that?
Yeah, well, the CDs, so then fast forward, now I'm at college. So in college, the CD thing died down. I didn't really do that anymore. But what I got into more and what I was always into was design. So I always enjoyed like designing things, designing shirts, I was just designing like flyers for the entrepreneurship club on campus and shit like that. And eventually I started doing logos and web design. So that was where I started at, was design. But then eventually that transferred over to copy, because when I would build websites for people, I was writing out the copy for them basically, because they either would not give me the content on time for the website, or it would just be absolutely horrible. And being that I came from, even though I was into design, I was taking marketing and I was into entrepreneurship and I was into selling a lot. So before I even knew about copywriting, I was kind of writing copy because I was just writing from a sales perspective, but I just didn't know I was writing copy. I was writing, thinking, how can I be persuasive with this? What's going to make this sell? And then after that, a friend of mine who was a client, or a friend of mine now who was a client at the time, they said, you know that what I'm paying you for as a web designer is not to write out the shit on my website. It's like, it's really good, but you should be charging for this. It's called copywriting. I'm like, oh, okay. And that was when I was really undercharging myself. I was really undercharging. And
just collect a couple $100 to write a whole sales letter for him.
Yeah. It was. I mean, we all go through those times where we are learning to value ourselves, right? So I had that time period where I was just doing a lot because I was worried that it wouldn't be worth enough.
Yeah.
And that's what sent me down on that path. So then in terms of Swipe.co coming into the picture, that came as a result of me just always having ideas. Like always been a big idea person. And because I know how to code, I learned how to code and design websites. I would work on these different ideas. And some of them were close to hitting. Like I had some really good concepts that I built out and that I was selling to like get investment. But this was an idea. What's that?
What were some of those?
Yeah, so one of them was called Seat Swap.
Okay.
And the idea is it was an app, and I don't know how to code iPhone apps, right?
Got it.
It was an app that allows you to go into a stadium and you'll see all the seats that were not bought, where you can upgrade to that seat at a discount. I thought this was a genius idea, a brilliant idea. And I had a teacher in my school, and this was like a few years after I graduated, but a teacher who was a venture capitalist, and he said, "This is the best idea I've ever heard from a student."
Wow.
Yeah. So I was super pumped about this. And
This is college?
What's that?
This is a college professor?
Yeah. Who's also working for a big investment company
Got
in
it.
New York. So he said, he's like, "I'll set you up with a meeting with the New York Mets and you can talk about it with them and everything." I was so pumped, dude. And at the time, I was really thinking about money too. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to sell this for $1 billion and all this shit. And my priorities were they were all in the wrong place. Like it was perfect at the time for what it was. But eventually what happened was, is I found out that there was a team in San Francisco, a team of like 20 people that were working on this idea. And I had built out a website. I built out an HTML demo so somebody can go on their phone and they can play around with it. But this team in San Francisco, they had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding. It was called Pogo Seed. I think it's still around. But they were working on this idea and they had gone really far with it. And so eventually I actually reached out to them and they wanted to hire me, but I didn't want it. I didn't want that. So I discontinued that and I moved on from that. But then Swiped came shortly after that.
Got it.
And there were other ideas in between that, but yeah, I love building things and like being in that startup stage.
I'm looking for a pen because I have your pen around, and my girl was in my office.
That's the big idea pen
next to me, the big idea pen, and she's like, "I love that pen."
Yeah,
and you
so
created
cool.
that.
Yes. Oh, and yes, literally, like even though the big idea is a copy term, I mean that was more than that for me because I'm always thinking of ideas and like big ideas, and not just thinking about the ideas and saying and not doing research, but I think what makes me, I guess you could say in that sense, like a powerhouse at starting things, because that's really in terms of like, if you were to put me in a position at a company or like if you're starting something, I'm the guy that you want to be starting it with. But then after that, somebody else needs to they need to take the reins in some way. But it's because my research skills combined with my thinking and my ability to like create the design and the website and the stuff. It's kind of like I'm able to formulate everything very quickly because of all these skills that I have. So it's not like I'm somebody that, well, I'll have an idea and I'll see roadblocks. I don't see any roadblocks. I'm like, research, design it, boom, shop it off to somebody else and figure this out. Yeah. Versus somebody else, I need to find a designer. I need to figure out this. I need to figure out that.
Yeah. Have you found that because of that, you've gotten good at delegating things? Because I feel the same way. I'm very good at coming up with ideas and then getting the idea going. And I've also always prided myself on being able to see it through all the way. However, I've just realized, especially recently, this podcast is a perfect example. Start the podcast. I do all the research to get the studio, the lighting correct, the microphones, everything. And now I'm starting it and I started editing. I edited probably the first 6 to 7 episodes myself. But in that process, I realized, me doing everything has just made it so that way I forgot oh, I also have an email list I need to keep up with. I also have another dating advice channel that I need to keep up with. And I realized that like when I was booking, I literally have 5 guests that I'm interviewing this week so we can get ahead of it. But I realized in the process of me getting the 5 guests last week, I was like, oh shit, I haven't posted a video on my other channel for like a week and a half. So would you say, because I definitely struggle with delegating at times, what's your experience with that?
My experience is your experience.
Yeah.
Seriously. That's something that I've had to work with, that I'm still in the process of working on. I have not learned to delegate much, and I've become very, very good at optimizing my own workflow and getting as much done as I can, and being myself. But yeah, I am not that type of person where it is a little bit more difficult for me to be the manager and to like delegate things out. So I feel like I need someone like that.
Yeah.
In a sense. But at the same time, like I'm looking for a virtual assistant now that would help with that. So I think that's a good start.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, and you can let me know if you feel the same way with delegating. It's like I'm so in the middle of doing it that me thinking of taking the time to look for someone else to do it seems like a waste of time. It seems like I'm taking steps backwards, even though theoretically I'd be taking 1 step back to move 10 steps forward. But then secondly, it's like when I have found other people to do things, I never feel like they do it the way I would do it or up to the standard that I would do it, which I know it's a process. But at first, when I would try to start doing this, I would get frustrated. I'm like, does nobody see it the way I see it? Like, why are they not able to do it the way I do it?
Yeah, I hear you, man. It's definitely like a people's problem, in that it's about the person, you know, that you get. And then also if you get somebody, because you get a virtual assistant, or I've worked with contractors and people that I've hired like in the Philippines and stuff, but you have to be very specific with them. Like you have to make sure that there is no way for them to screw it up. And I think that comes from systemization. Kind of like, you know, you look at McDonald's as an example, they have teenagers operating the place, and it's not falling apart. Now, is it that difficult? Not necessarily, but still the person needs training and they need to get used to that environment. So I think systems and that repetitiveness is kind of the answer long term.
I totally agree, man. Like even with this podcast, I got my buddy to edit it, and he's been able to dominate it. He's done a couple of episodes by this point, but it's only because after all of my negative experiences, I probably spent last year going through a lot of stress, just trying to figure out how to be okay with delegating things. So for this one, I edited the first 7 podcasts or whatever. And so because of that, I had the thumbnail and the editing process and the workflow down to a system to where for the first time, I was just like, hey man, here's how I do it. And I recorded a screen flow, and start to finish, I was able to do it real quick. Cause like you, I tried to just figure out the most optimized way of doing it. And he's been able to dominate it. So yeah, it's just really interesting for me to hear that you and I have struggled with some of the same things, but I also feel like it's because we probably had a similar kind of just mentality towards entrepreneurship and everything, where it's like, idea, let's fucking go, you know? Yeah,
there's definitely, I mean, as we're talking, there's a lot of parallels between our paths, as you know, especially with our businesses and stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I've also felt the same way with guys like Clark Kegley and Brian Moncada specifically. Like when I talk to them, very similar in story or just mentality. And it's kind of ironic how all 4 of us kind of gravitate towards the same group, and we're all similar in that nature.
Yeah, dude. And I find that and kind of going back to a concept I talked about earlier, right? This intertwining, this finding connectivity in everything. That is kind of going on this journey of, right, shedding these different beliefs, becoming more of yourself. That is the magic that I've been discovering. However you want to explain it in terms of science or physics or whatever you're into.
Yeah.
I can't deny that what I experience is this type of connectivity on a much higher level than I ever used to, where, and I use the term synchronicities a lot to describe things, because I don't know if you're that into that, or the use of that word, but my life can be like a big synchronicity sometimes, and that is when it's the most fun, is where you see the connections everywhere, which is kind of like seeing things from a multi-dimensional perspective, you know, where everything is like a fractal. It's all like reflections. Reflections are everywhere. Like you repeating stuff back to me where I'm like, oh yeah, I think the same way. And you could say, it's so easy to just say as humans, oh yeah, that's interesting that you also think that way. But comes a certain point, and this involves you letting go of the reins, where you go deeper and deeper, and eventually you can't deny it anymore, where the certain things happen, and you can't say anymore, oh, what a coincidence. It's like, come on, man, look around you. Like, notice everything around you, right? Like there's connections, messages everywhere.
It is funny. Like, so I don't specifically use the word synchronicity. But when you said that, immediately I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
My first time even hearing the word synchronicity was probably a year ago. I was watching an Amazon Prime movie called Synchronicity. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't. It's an actual, like a Hollywood movie or a documentary?
A Hollywood movie. And it's kind of mind-blowing in the sense that, I'll give you a quick synopsis. It's about this guy, big actor. I forget his name off the top of my head, but you'd recognize him immediately. This guy ends up having a baby with this girl, but this guy, the girl ends up meeting a guy, having a baby with him, and it's a big synchronicity because time travel's involved. And long story short, because it's so mind-blowing, and it so doesn't make sense when I try to explain it. But the moral of the movie is, the girl started out as a girl, got in an accident, and became a guy, went back in time, had sex with this girl that ended up being him, which gave birth to him as a girl. And then the girl grew up. Dude, it was fucked.
Well, that's like the way that you're describing it, right? Is it's like a web. And that's how I see synchronicity, is when, and this is actually part of the book that I'm working on. It's like this whole idea of having and taking evidence, like looking for evidence, because what happens is and imagine, being at like an FBI office or something where they have all the needles in the wall with the strings and everything. Yeah. It's kind of like that, but with your life. And the more evidence that you gather and you see it in front of you, and you're like, I can't deny this shit. Like, this is just, it's too much. This is so in my face. And the more that you trust it, I'm seeing that the more I let go, and I'm able to just see things as kind of magical, is they really do happen in crazy ways. And I mean, I have so many different examples. Yeah. Just from the past month, like just, it's, and certain numbers, the way that numbers show up. I don't know if you've ever looked into like different, like in numerology and stuff. And I'm not that big into like the meaning of certain numbers and stuff. I know a little bit, but a few years ago, like something that came up for me is the number 44 just started appearing in a lot of different scenarios in my life. And what happened is it became kind of a marker for me. So whenever I see 44, it's almost like a wink from the universe. Like, and that's all I see it as. You're going in the right direction. Like, and it shows up in the weirdest, the strangest times. Like, it's crazy how it comes. Like, I live in apartment 244. All these different like things that come together in ways that you wouldn't imagine. I was talking to a friend about this, right? And I dropped him off. I was about to go home, and I told him like 44 is a big number for me, 11. So I turn on my navigation to go home. I was gonna be home at 2:44, and it was it was 4.44 miles away, and it was like 4 minutes and 11 seconds away. It's like where you just see these patterns that show up, and you see them enough times where they actually mean something to you. It's not, you don't think you're going crazy anymore because they show up so much that you can't even, it's helpful. That's the difference. Most people, they think too much into like, well, how does this happen? How does this work?
Yeah.
How about this? How is it helpful to you? Because when I need confirmation on something, if I see that number, that's helpful to me.
Yeah.
Because now I'm able to like confirm in my head, even if it doesn't mean that, it's helpful.
Yeah.
So
it almost is like a thing that immediately changes your state and gives you like conviction and confidence moving forward on your current path, even if it's not necessarily number 44, but more even just a state change. But you're ironically the second person I've talked to in the last couple of weeks who said something about numbers. I've never looked into the significance of numbers in my life. And I even told Clark this about a week ago or so. I have always kind of struggled with like energy, law of attraction, numerology, things like that. And Clark was ironically the first person who one of his YouTube videos, he was talking about numbers and how they have significance. And I don't know if I've never necessarily had that same experience with numbers specifically, but I've had similar experiences with just when I look back over the last few years of my life and I think about all the shit that I thought was like, it was the end of the world. This is going to ruin my career, whatever it was, that always ends up being the turning point that led me to the wins that I had today, you know?
Right.
So it is kind of crazy, the synchronicity looking back. And the first time, ironically, I think if I had to put money on the moment where Patrick James got addicted to marijuana, it was after I dropped out of dental school a couple of years. In my whole life, I had always told myself, you know, I don't want to smoke weed. Weed is not for me or whatever. And then I'm probably like 27 at this point. I'm broke. I'm about a year and a half out of dental school. I'm trying to make the dating advice thing work. And my roommate at the time, he had a vape pen and he would hit this thing every night after he'd get off work. And one night he let me hit it and I got high and I started talking to a girl who I was in dental school with, went to dental school with, good friend, not trying to hook up with her or anything, but we were just talking and catching up. And the whole time, that whole year after dental school, I always say it was like fitting 6 years of personal development into like 3 months, because I'd never before felt like massive rejection in the way that I had felt at that point. Like my parents didn't support my decision. Everybody in Kansas is talking shit. Oh, PJ, the guy who didn't get girls when he lived in Kansas is now wanting to be a dating coach. And that's kind of my hero story with the dating thing. But they just know the version of me back then, right? And then I'm in dental school. Nobody knows this is like a passion of mine secretly, that I'm trying to go out and improve my own dating life. And when I drop out to do it, now people start talking. And I don't even know what people said because I turned a blind eye to it. But I had never felt that much rejection and just like almost alone. Nobody's here to support me on this path. So I had to almost restart. And I look back on almost not being able to pay my rent. On my birthday, having a mini panic attack for the first time ever because I'm not only struggling to pay rent, but also my car got towed on my birthday. And I'm like, man, this all sucked. But then I'm talking to this girl and I'm high, and it's like the first time I'm high like in years. And I'm talking about these experiences and realizing I'm actually grateful for those experiences because I had a midlife crisis in my 20s. Thank God. Or else I would have had to wait until I was 50 to start doing what I actually want to do, you know? And so talking about synchronicities, I think it is pretty crucial, you know?
Yeah, man. And I have a feeling that now that, you know, you're hearing this from me, from Clark, you're going to start to open up to these things. And because I've been on the path, I've been on the full path where I started off being skeptical of anything that seemed somewhat magical and mystical, and being skeptical of that. And it's only through life experience where I have this personal evidence you know, that I've collected my own, that no one can say to me that this is correct or this is right or this is wrong. I don't care because I know what works for me. And that's that coming back to that whole idea of becoming an expert at being you. Like, you may not resonate with numerology. Maybe you don't really, you're not that attracted to working with numbers or thinking about that. It doesn't matter. But if you're open to it, that's what matters. Because otherwise you're closing off avenues of different ways that things could like magically unfold in your life and happen in these different ways. So I'm just so passionate about being open-minded and not putting restrictions on things. And at the end of the day, it coming back to your experience versus proof. Everybody needs proof that something works or that something is true or that something. Who's bold enough to just say, this works for me and I'm sticking to it? You know, it takes balls. It takes like being bold, but people love that. And why do they love it? It's because it's empowering.
Yeah. It's
empowering for somebody to just say, this is in my experience. And I think the world, there could be world peace if people just started sentences with, in my experience, because then it's not about fact or what the truth is. It's just, listen, what makes us all unique is our experience. Our unique, nobody in the world has the same experience we do. It's not even close. We make connections and we act like they're similar, but really when it comes down to moment to moment, full life, it's totally unique. And so that unique perspective, I forgot where I was going with this, but basically, like in my experience, because this is what's unique to us. And that has to be like honored more highly than in authority saying that this is true, that somebody, you know, coming in and telling you what's your truth versus you deciding that, you know.
How long ago did you kind of realize the number 44? When was that?
It's like 3 years ago. It was when I started. So we can get into some weirder stuff. So I started connecting. I started connecting with my grandfather all of a sudden, and this is someone who I never met. He died before I was born, but I just felt this like really strong connection to him. And I just started getting these senses like he was around. And when I would sense he was around, for whatever reason, I kept seeing not just 44, but 444, where it would often happen around those times. So that was the beginning of it. And I didn't force this.
I just found a connection, bro. You're 32. I'm 30. 3 plus 0 plus 3 plus 2 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4.
There you go. Hey, that's cool. You know, and 8. What's that?
It's like the movie 23 with Jim Carrey.
I haven't actually. No.
You need to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No.
Bro.
I haven't.
You'll relate to it because it's Jim Carrey and his character having the same experience with the number 23, and it actually drives him crazy.
That's crazy, man. That's awesome. I'll definitely check that out. So I'm talking about the 444 or 44 specifically, right? But what actually got me into numerology, speaking of, you know, my age, 32. So in numerology, there's something called a life path. And if you add up your birth date, your full birth date, all the numbers, you reduce it down as much as you can, and that's your life path. So for whatever reason, I was attracted to look into this. And this was like 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was like in my mid-20s. And I found out that my life path, right, it ends up being 32. So 3 plus 2 is 5. 32, right? And what I read at the time was that for many people, and it's not for everybody, right? But I read it and I felt something. It said, oftentimes this age is a very significant age for someone in their life path, like age before it's reduced down. And mine was 32. And dude, this year has been huge for me in many ways, where it's just like from a self perspective, like growth perspective, I just feel like a completely, like so many different shifts. And I totally feel a renaissance in a sense where I'm like a new person. And I knew this back then because, and why do I say I knew it? Because I read it and I just felt like I knew it. Because it's one thing to believe in something, but belief requires knowing. Like knowing isn't, it's different than believing. When you know something, when like you truly know something, and that has to do with getting more in touch with your intuition and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've learned to decipher it more where I can feel when I know like something is going to happen. And it's not always that I have that. It comes here and there. But I just had this weird feeling like 32 is going to be a really big year for me. It actually, it pissed me off then because I felt, and this is a fucking page in a book that I read, so right?
How long ago were you reading this book?
What's that?
How long ago were you reading this book?
I forget the exact year or how long ago it was, but yeah, it was like
it was a while ago.
It was my mid-20s. Yeah.
Got it. And was it saying 32 for everybody or 32 specifically for you?
No, for your life path. So I don't know what yours would reduce down to, but everyone is different. So my life path is technically 5, but to get to 5, it's 3 + 2 reduced down to, right? So it adds up to 32. So I read that, and for whatever reason, that hit with me. Like, yeah, 32. I don't know why, but this seems like a kind of like a pinnacle year for me. And at the time, I was pissed because like 32, that's like 6 years away and shit like that. But it was more about, it was much bigger than that because it was more about me, exploring a variety of things, you know, and also becoming empowered enough to not get caught up in if somebody tells you like a prediction about yourself and you then saying, oh, that's going to happen. Fuck. Like, and that's, what is that? It's disempowered. Being empowered is like when it's going based on how you feel. And even though in that moment I felt a little bit disempowered, me transforming that was empowering because now it wasn't about, I have to wait until a certain age. It's like, all right, this feels like this is going to be like a big transition period for me. So it's going to be like a hell of a ride getting there. And after it too, I never placed that much significance on it, but that's how I got into numerology. I found that out. And also my life path, actually reading about that helped me a lot.
So it specifically said that this would be a good year for you or just like a significant year for you?
In numerology with life paths, it's just a general rule that it could be common for someone to have a significant year on their life path year.
So this is like the defining year of your life according to that book, or just one of them?
I don't see it that way at all. Yeah, it was just what it was, where I just knew that it was going to be like a significant year. And that's what I took it as. Because, and this goes back to this empowering perspective, right? No prediction, nothing that you hear from somebody else can change your life unless you decide that it can change your life, you know?
Yeah.
You're in charge in that way. Nobody can tell you that. Like people that say, he made me feel bad, he made me feel this way. Man, you made yourself, at the end of the day, you made yourself feel that way. And that's just because you're literally buying into what they're saying. Like you're buying what they're giving you. And so it's you deciding what you want to buy into. And that stood out to me as something that, like, it felt good, but the difference was it was my beliefs that were getting in the way that made it bad. Because if someone tells you, like, hey, things are going to be awesome at this year, like this is going to be a big year for you, you could say, oh shit, I gotta wait. These years are gonna suck. So what? After that, it's not gonna be good. Or you could just say, okay, I'm gonna recognize that and use it in the most empowering and the most like useful way that I can, because it's just what you make of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And there's this thing that I heard, I guess that you can consider this somewhat numerology, but Dean Graziosi, when I was working with him, it was like literally me, Dean, Brian, and Ryan and Jeremy in a car, and we were driving to Sedona one day. Just like, it was like my second day working there. And they kind of said something, and they were informing me because apparently they had all talked about it before, which is like the rule of 3. And it's like, if you hear about one concept 3 times from 3 different sources, that's when you got to take action on it or whatever. And so in like the last week, this is the second time I've heard about numerology. And I guess Dean would be the first one or whatever a couple of years ago. So that's the rule of 3 right there. Maybe I should take it seriously.
Yeah. And saying that, but not even realizing and not having to know or label it as numerology, you know, because at the end of the day, does it work for you? And being open-minded enough to utilize everything that comes in for you as different tools. Like the fact that that came into your life and now mine, to me, that instantly, just because it showed up in your life, it has significance. Because otherwise, why would it show up? See, that's where my head is at now. Like how I live is literally where when something comes in, maybe it's not that significant.
Yeah.
But if I get like an intuitive hit where I feel like there's something here, and then I just sit with that and I allow it to happen. Not saying this must mean something very significant. And then, because that's forcing it. That's like, then you're trying to make it significant. But if you just, all right, this came in interesting, like being the investigator, right? And that's how I see, because I was talking about being the researcher. That's how I like to live, is where, oh, interesting, a clue. Let me look into this. Being the investigative reporter, being Mulder from X-Files, and like, interesting. Let's look into that.
This is kind of a side tangent, but it's also somewhat related, because talking about time and like how it came into your life at that time or whatever. I've been playing with this idea ever since college. So in college, I was going to college in Kansas at K-State, and there was one time, and it was the first time this university had ever done a snow day and canceled class. Apparently they had a history of never canceling class no matter how bad the weather got. Well, this time it was so bad that the entire ground, all the concrete was covered in ice to the degree that I tried to go out my door to walk to the mailbox, which was like 50 feet away. And I slipped on my ass like 3 times and it busted my ass. But anyways, I ordered a few books online because I was going to be stuck inside. And one of them was called Heaven is for Real. Have you ever heard of that book?
Yeah. They made a movie out of it too, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. And so I read it. And this kid who apparently had a near-death experience where he died, went to heaven, spoke to God, spoke to Jesus, met his stillbirth like sibling or whatever in heaven, and then came back and like recollected the story. One of the things he talked about was, and at the time I'm like a 20-something, like 21-year-old kid, so I'd never thought about this, but he said time is an illusion. And he said when he was in heaven, he was able to see the entire timeline and just see everything from what happened and what's going to happen as if it was all just one at the same time. Yeah. And then recently I realized, I think I talked about it either on Clark's podcast a couple podcasts ago or the last one, when I realized, time itself is a man-made creation. So bear with me on this one. I was watching this documentary called The Universe on Netflix, and it was about galaxies, right? And it was talking about like our galaxy compared to this galaxy, how far away they were. And I realized that our concept of time is based off of how long it takes our planet in our specific point in space to go around our sun. So 1 year is 1 revolution around our star. But let's say there's an intelligent species in a different galaxy on a different planet around a different star, different sizes, different gravitational pulls, different distances. Their measurement of time is going to be completely different than our measurement of time. And if you really think about it, our measurement of time is just us trying to make sense of what we observe in the sky so we can keep track of our day. Our day is just like, oh, the sun is up and now the sun's down, right? So maybe there might be an intelligent species out there that doesn't even know about the concept of time, but they're way more advanced than us because they've never thought about measuring units of time in that same way. So if we think about time and think about like the synchronicities of life, what if it all really is connected, and where you are going in the future has already happened, but we're just experiencing it from our human experience because we measure time in a specific way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. You know what really fucked with my head in like an awesome way, and I love this movie, Interstellar. When they go to this other planet and he comes back and he's like the same age and his daughter is twice his age.
Yeah.
I mean, that the depiction of that, it really showed you how weird time is. You know, it really like demonstrated in that movie, and I love that. But absolutely, man, time is so malleable, and it is very important. I think the understanding that you were talking about, it directly plays in to this idea of synchronicity, because you see that everything is connected. And how can it be so connected? Because if it's all happening at once, well, of course it can be very connected. Where it could seem, there are things that happen with me where it would seem like I traveled back in time to plan something for something that's about to come up, where it seems so relevant and so like synchronous that it'll just blow my mind, you know, where it's like just time is very malleable. It is very,
to your point in space, it is relative, which can be a scary or a freeing thought, because then you get into the terms of like destiny. Like, am I destined to fail? Am I destined to succeed? Is it already pre-planned? Can I change where I go? And I think maybe that's where, so here's one thing we can't dispute. Our measurement of time is a man-made creation. All right. So that's one thing that's a fact if you really think about points in space. But what we don't really know, because I don't think our view of physics and the way things work on a quantum level is fully understood. Is it predetermined, or does our intention going into that moment change the trajectory of that? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. So going back to like this idea of hearing a prediction or reading something, or let's say you go to a psychic. So most people, when they go to a psychic, they think, and this is the people that really buy into it completely, in a disempowering way, is when they hear something that they don't want to hear. And then they think that because they said it and that they believed it in that moment, that it's going to happen. And really, in my point of view, the second that a prediction is given, it could change in that moment, because now you're aware of what they just said and you can change it.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, even
that's
though
a physics thing. That's a physics concept about Schrodinger's cat. Have you heard about that?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Yeah, that fucking experiment is amazing. It's like one of the coolest experiments.
Define it for the people listening who don't know what it is.
Well, maybe you can define it better than me. I remember it vaguely in terms of, so the cat, maybe you could describe it better, because
I think it was basically talking about superpositions of atoms in space.
Yeah.
And so there's this thing called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that I learned about in chemistry class, which is basically if we're trying to pinpoint exactly where an electron is around the nucleus, because electrons, they're not even microscopic, they're quantum, so they're so small and they spin around the nuclei, and however many protons and electrons and the balance of the positive and negative determines what element that is, right? And so the thing is that's crazy about that is you can know how fast that electron is moving, and you can also know the exact point that electron is at, but the more you know about this, the less you know about that. So you can never know both at the same time. And so that's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So that kind of plays into Schrodinger's cat, which is, hey, if this is a container and inside of here is a cat, the cat can either be alive or dead.
Yes.
But until you look at it, it is undecided. The moment you look at it, that's when it becomes either alive or dead. But before you look at it, it's a combination of both, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
Related back to what you said, you were talking about like the moment you put it out in the universe and observe it and talk about it is the moment it becomes a thing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I know you described better than me because I'm not good with scientific explanations, but I just knew Yeah, you don't know until you look, right? Like with the cat. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, I think the number one word that I'm probably using over and over again is this idea of empowerment, because we are ultimately in the driver's seat. No matter what tools you use, no matter what, I mean, there's different belief systems that you can buy into that determine how in control you think you are. And that determines how you use these different tools and information, because it's not like certain things like astrology or numerology or different things, relating to different mystical crafts and stuff like that. It's not the things themselves that have the effect. It's how you work with them, and thinking that, like a lot of people, for instance, we visited Salem, Massachusetts in October, where witchcraft is really big. And then we were in New Orleans over New Year's, where voodoo is very big. So voodoo is more about protection. It's more like people are protecting themselves from evil, whereas witchcraft is more about doing good and working with nature. So I don't resonate with voodoo at all. Witchcraft type stuff is cool. But which one are you buying? They're both like magical type of tools that you can work with, but it's how you view them and how you use them that determines what you get out of them. So whenever you feel like you are trying to protect yourself, you should question that. Like you have to protect yourself from something.
Yeah. Well, talking about kind of what you resonate with, and this is also another side tangent, going down on the alien rabbit hole, bro. Because this is one thing I learned about you recently, because we've known each other for a couple of years, but I didn't know until a couple of weeks ago that you were deep down the rabbit hole, just like me, but more so than you lead on. I feel like you're a lot deeper than I would have ever guessed. And you're sending me ebooks and shit. And
I'm a researcher, bro. I'm a researcher.
You're a researcher.
I'm an investigator.
How did you get into it? What got you into the rabbit hole? What was that moment? And then what are some of the conclusions that you've come to about it?
Oh man, I'm trying to think, I'll say that in 2012 is when I got into law of attraction and just like spiritual type stuff. That's when I started reading, because I'd read The Secret before, but I started reading more spiritual type books and getting into opening my mind up. Because my mind was always open, but I just wasn't absorbing this type of material. Like I started with self-help type stuff, Tony Robbins, and it was like the first program I listened to was Personal Power. And then because my mind is wide open and I'm a curious person, like, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually I'm going to keep going deeper. Like it's
you even had an experience recently where it all came to fruition recently, right? I didn't mean.
Where I saw, like, I had a sighting.
The little floating white balls above New York City.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to happen. Like, that was pretty dramatic the way that it happened that day. I know it didn't catch it as well on camera, but you could still see it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it still looked kind of crazy from the video you sent me. If I can find it, I might have the editor throw it on top of this video to show what I'm talking about. But anyway, sorry to cut you off, man. Like, where were you at?
No, I mean, there's so many different directions we can go in, right? But I guess I just wanted to mention, even for people that aren't into this, which I don't know anyone listening to this at this point that probably wouldn't be after watching all your podcasts.
If they stuck through the numerology part, they'll definitely stick through the UFO part.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But this is good. You're gonna weed out your people, and I think if you're anything like me, you want some weirdness in your crowd, because that makes things fun. It makes things fun. But this just kind of naturally happened as a result of me being very curious and opening up my mind and going in these different avenues. And just having certain experiences, like when I was younger, I was very afraid of aliens, where my biggest fear when I was like in elementary school was of being abducted. And it wasn't even necessarily just of like being abducted by aliens, but I was just scared of being abducted, where before I would go to bed, I'd have my mom promise me that like no one is going to come through the window and take me. It was crazy.
Dang.
Like that. Yeah. That was my life. Like that was where my head was at in terms of my fears. And I remember watching this one documentary. It was like a fake documentary.
Was it
and
the kind?
No, this is like when I was very young.
Okay.
Like 7, 8 years old, something like that. And it was like a fictional movie, but it was done, and this was before its time, actually, now that I think about it. This was done kind of like Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch style, where it was actual video footage. And it was of these alien beings abducting, like infiltrating these people's houses and abducting them. And it was terrifying to me. And I don't know, like, if that activated something in me where maybe I had some type of experience, because from what I've read and me looking into this and people that have been abducted and stuff like that, you often actually choose to forget. Just like how you suppress certain things that you don't want to remember. Yeah. If it's a fearful experience, it'll be like a co-creation in that sense where, because these beings have technologies that can allow that type of thing to happen, where there's maybe you don't remember it, but then all of a sudden, something like that happens where I'm watching a video and that triggers the fear and it comes up. So I feel like that might have been what happened, because I have had all types of dreams where like a spaceship coming down. Yeah. And I had one recently, and this was crazy. And I looked this up afterwards. So I had this dream that I saw a UFO coming down like a disc-shaped object, and it was super real, very vivid. And it was like I was in Arizona, actually, but dreams, they don't have to be exact. Yeah. So I see it and I got excited, because this is like stuff I'm excited about now, is if I see something, I see a UFO, and it comes down, and I don't remember anything after that, other than that I was frozen in midair at one point where it was like I couldn't move. And I could actually turn my head a little bit, but my body was, I was just kind of hanging in the air. And I looked that up afterwards, like that type of experience, because it felt very real. Yeah. Like it was, I don't know, some kind of memory or something. And there are people that have talked about how that is like something they experienced, where when you come back from an experience like that, you're kind of, because there's shifting dimensions and there's shifting like energies, that you have to be kind of like sleep paralysis is a common theme, actually, from people that have said that they've experienced abductions. Yeah. Because they're like, their energy, their body is coming back from somewhere else where there were different shifts and energy work going on. So yeah, that's what I've read about. That's from my understanding.
So a couple things from your story really appealed to me. One was the irrational, deep fear of being abducted as a kid. Mm-hmm. Do you think that came from somewhere, or have you always had that fear as long as you can remember?
I don't know where it came from. I really don't.
So that's what really stands out to me, because my girlfriend is the exact same way. I mean, I didn't even really go down the alien rabbit hole until like maybe a year ago, but my girlfriend has an irrational fear, a phobia of aliens and being abducted and UFOs. And I have no clue why. And I always joke, hey, maybe she was abducted once and she's trying to suppress the memory. I don't know, but it's really funny. And what's ironic about that is her parents are also really into UFOs, because we're in Phoenix, and her parents were here during the Phoenix lights. And they see stuff by their house all the time, to the point where her aunt has actually, her aunt is basically her mom, her aunt and uncle raised her, will go in her car and just like try to chase these lights in her car. So yeah, she has an irrational fear of those. But then the second thing that stood out to me was the sleep paralysis thing, because do you experience sleep paralysis at all? Ever?
Not as much anymore, but yeah, I have in the past. And in that dream, even though I didn't wake up in sleep paralysis, I had that experience of it, which was super vivid.
Got it. So I think I told you this over text a couple weeks ago. I've never really looked into the abduction stuff because I feel like it's harder for me to believe someone recounting an experience that may or may not have happened versus me saying, this is a sighting. Nobody can explain that, but we all saw it. So that's kind of the stuff that I tend to look into. But then I know I've had a lot of experience just like with sleep paralysis myself, being afraid, waking up, not being able to move, not being able to scream for help because your vocal cord is paralyzed, right? So it's a scary experience. But now when I experience it, I know I've had it happen enough to where I know that I'm 2 seconds away from experiencing it. I'm like, oh, fuck. Oh, shit, now I'm stuck again because it's happened that common. And I think for people who have actually experienced sleep paralysis, because that's, I think, the argument against abduction cases is like, maybe they're dreaming being abducted when they're really in sleep paralysis. And I know from my experience of sleep paralysis, yeah, you hear random shit, voices, you see shadows, but I know for a fact I wasn't being abducted, right? And so you being someone who's looked into it, has the fear of being abducted, had a vivid experience to where you felt like it was real, but you've also experienced sleep paralysis. In your head, is there a clear difference between those two experiences?
Between
sleep paralysis and that memory of you or dream of you being abducted that felt real?
Yeah, I mean, obviously not all sleep paralysis is abduction related, right? I mean, I don't believe that, but as being the investigator archetype, I look for connections. And so when I see enough connections and when I really feel like there's something here, I kind of go with it and it snowballs. And then, all these different things open up and you start to see these things that you just didn't see before, so I'll tie this into now because the abduction phenomenon, that has to do with the gray aliens, like the gray species, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this with Phoenix Lights, but do you know who's supposed to be behind that?
I have no idea, bro.
You have no idea? Okay. So
this is exciting for me because usually I'm the one who knows more of the facts than the person.
Yeah. So the beings that are supposed to be behind that, are a civilization called the Yael, and they have certain types of ships, those triangular ships.
Okay.
And they have certain formations. So when you see certain sightings where you notice that, just like the one that I experienced over here, well, they will be in threes. They'll be like in V formations. That is supposed to be a specific civilization. And how do I know? How could I say like, oh, Yael, where'd you get that from? All of this information it's coming from people, and this is where it gets really crazy, is people that are like channelers or that have had experiences where they literally, just like a near-death experience, where you come back and you feel like you had this very real experience that you can't explain, but you feel like you had it and like you received information from it. Because otherwise, how would we know? Like, they're not on this earth. They're not on this planet. We can only know these things from encounters in different altered states that we can't explain other than this was my experience. And so there's through experiences like that where people will give that type of information, but also different channelers and stuff like that. And what the consensus is, and if you look this up, you'll see this is like amongst
Yael. Do you know?
Yahyel.
Okay, I'll look it up for sure.
Yeah, and so here's where it gets really interesting, right? So these beings, being that, if you think about it, Phoenix Lights, the biggest sighting ever in the United States, right? They made themselves known, like it was super evident.
Yeah. Do you think it was a bunch of ships in formation, or do you think it was one giant ship with lights?
It looked like from because I watched the documentary recently.
Yeah.
It looked like a mothership to me. It looked like a giant one, like miles wide, like huge. And if you look at the footage, like do you have a take on that? Because from what I saw, that's what it looks like. But maybe there were other ships as well involved, but I think it was one big one.
That's the thing is the Phoenix Lights is probably the most famous case of a mass sighting because thousands of people across the whole valley saw it. And from the documentaries I've seen, the little bit of research I've done on myself outside of the documentaries, I'm unable to find a consensus. There's a lot of people who say they saw the shape block out the stars above it, so which is evidence that it could have been one giant ship and it was just hovering. But then I've also seen footage once, and it stood out to me. That's why I remember it, but I haven't been able to find it again, where one of the lights kind of zipped into place, which means that it was probably a smaller ship that zipped into formation. So I don't know.
Or it could have been just going, because these things, like, they're able to shift in and out. Because my girlfriend has seen a ship. I've seen the sightings here. I've seen videos of the same type of ships. And I'm talking about, now these are more, I guess you would say, like scout ships where it's not a mothership.
Yeah. They
can just pop in and out because they could just pop in and out of different realities and dimensions. It's different technology, you know? So it's tough to pinpoint it, but from what I saw, it looked like it was one kind of massive ship, and maybe they're all, I'd have to watch it again. But anyway, so here's what's interesting. And of course, once you go down the route I'm talking about, where I'm giving you names of civilizations,
you're going to get stuck in a hole. It's like quicksand.
Yeah, dude, you're not going to prove, like, anyone that wants proof, you're not going to prove it until there's a landing, right? But this is interesting stuff, and so we'll talk about it. So the idea is, and there are consensus, like what's interesting is that through multiple people's experiences, and this is how we came about this idea of the gray aliens and their different, like, characteristics and who they are. It's all through accounts of people. That's it. We don't have anyone, we don't have an alien on this earth to talk to. We don't have an extraterrestrial to talk to. So people forget that this is all based on people's personal accounts and different information, like I said, from people that are able to more easily tap into it, like channelers. But in this case, with this civilization, so the consensus agreement amongst many people is that this is the actual race that we would encounter first with first contact. And the reason why, and this actually makes a lot of sense, the reason why is because they're actually most like us. They are supposed to be, they have human genetics. So the idea is that if we're going to have some kind of open contact with a civilization, who's going to be the first one? Well, it would make sense that it would be the ones that are, we see them, we're like, oh, they're not actually that much different than us, but they're just like, they have extraterrestrial genetics. So now I'm gonna bring it to a really crazy level, right? And this is just, if you do research on this, I'm not the type of person that says this is true belief.
We are just reporters here of the show.
We are reporters. And I always tell people, do you like science fiction movies? Like, yeah, they're fun. I like them. Okay. This is the best fucking science fiction you can get, because you're investigating, you're looking into people's accounts, like actual real things that, and
backed up by a lot of footage too.
Yeah, by a lot of footage, by a lot of different, I mean, this is the real sci-fi, you know? So if anything, just see it as fun entertainment. And so that's how I look at it, especially when somebody is trying to question me too much. Like, dude, I'm just having fun. Like,
what frustrates me with the Phoenix Lights is maybe the government has covered it up so well to where the only thing that we know about the Phoenix Lights that we can say for sure is here's the footage of it. But that's it. We haven't heard any follow-up. The government just said it was flares, but flares don't hover over the entire state in formation at the same point in like at the same elevation and don't fall or don't go out for hours and hours, right? So it couldn't have been flares. But another thing like that really blew my mind, and I guess this is kind of why I asked you a few minutes ago, like what was the moment that you got deep into it, is because the moment for me was, yeah, it was all fun and games. I might as well have been talking about the boogeyman or Bigfoot when I'm talking about aliens and thinking about it. But then I did a quick Google search and I went to CIA.gov And I realized CIA.gov through the Freedom of Information Act has
Mhm.
all these files, all these memos talking about flying saucers, talking about the cover up, talking about
Yeah.
this stuff. And they're free to look at. And one of them that really stood out to me was a memo, a CIA.gov memo that had just pages and pages of pictures of flying saucers and famous sightings. So in my head, if there's nothing to the UFO conspiracy, then why is it on CIA.gov? And
Yeah.
when I look deeper into it, you find out there's actual footage that many documentaries have footage of, but there's footage of apparently a time in the 50s, 1952, I believe. It was right after the mass sighting over Washington, D.C., which you can look up 1952 UFO over Washington, D.C. You'll see all the images of it. But apparently shortly after that, President Truman had this short period of time, like 3 or 4 hours, where he was in Southern California and he was off the books for a little bit. And so when they went back and asked him where he was like, oh, I went to an emergency dentist appointment. Okay, that seems like a bullshit excuse. But then there's actual footage of apparently this flying saucer flying over the hills in California and going towards Holloman Air Force Base, where they scheduled a meeting with the actual president of the United States. Now, the crazy part about this footage, and this is why it's controversial in all the documentaries that show it, is they'll show like the first, I don't know, a few seconds of the flying saucer kind of coming in, but then they cut the frame to where you don't see it actually land and then walk out. Apparently, that used to be there from the original documentary people. And I'm sure maybe you've heard about this. If you have, I'd like to know your take on it. But then apparently the government came, took the footage again, and then gave it back to them. And when they gave it back, the frames where it actually showed the flying saucer landing and then walking out was cut out of the footage. And so all you see is just like this little flying saucer just zip, and then that's all you get.
Oh, yeah. I haven't looked too much into that, but I mean, that is so commonplace, I think. In accounts like that, you see it over and over again, and it's just a matter of, just like how you went on the CIA website, this requires research. You know, I love having conversations with people that do research. Everyone should do research. You can't have a conversation about this and like be so confident in what you're saying or say this is the way when there's so much to explore, there's so much to discover. And the rabbit hole is my second home. So that's where I'm at. I mean, that's where you gotta kind of live at to really enjoy this stuff, you know?
I like Clark's take on it. Clark, because we're all entrepreneurial, we're all in the online information, online marketing space, copywriting, what have it. And Clark was like, I don't feel bad about going down the rabbit hole because it's like, it's our way to kind of tune out from what we do day to day. Because our brain is always going and we're always diving deep into what we're doing. So it's kind of like our escape from online marketing and business, but we're just redirecting that same energy towards something that interests us, like the real life sci-fi, like what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm not getting that from copywriting. Like there's only so much excitement and out of this world stuff that I'm going to encounter. And I need that as I continuously dive deeper into the unknown. I just keep leveling up where after a while, once you have gone through all of like the basic evidence of, okay, so the CIA knew about this. Okay, so this is happening. Then after that, that's when you really start getting into stuff like I was talking about, like looking into, okay, we don't know specifically, we don't have evidence of this race, video or photos, but you really start looking into like the potentials of what's there and like what could happen. And it just gets crazier, man, the more you look into it.
Yeah.
You know, like this idea that, which I think logically makes a lot of sense, that the individuals who we would interact with first with open contact would be not just like us, but very similar to us. And if you think about this whole idea of the abduction phenomenon and what's going on there, well, if you really look into that, there's this idea that genetics taken from these people that are interacting with the great civilization, with these different beings. And what's happening? where is that genetics going? Like there's human genetics being used in these different theories. And so if it's almost like, it's a really cool idea if you think about it, this idea that there are extraterrestrial and human genetics that have been combined, and that they would be the first people that we would actually interact with open contact, because then it's almost kind of like family in a weird sort of way, you know, where it's not so far-fetched because there's a similarity, there's a commonality.
Here's where I kind of stand on the whole UFO conspiracy, is like, the more you look into it, and me, I'm just trying to investigate why, what is the purpose, what is the real truth and what's going on. And it seems like the further in you go, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to draw conclusions based off of the same circumstantial evidence on the surface, but then you dive deeper, and then that's where stuff starts breaking off into different little tangents, and you really don't really know what to accept as fact or which one is more correct than the other, because now you're getting further away from the actual circumstantial evidence. But what really fascinates me is like, or where I come to at the end of the day is like, how does this affect me on a day-to-day basis? And will I ever know the truth? Because I think part of my motivation, obviously going deeper into it, is eventually I want to learn the actual truth and figure out what's actually going on. And the scary part about that is like, will I ever find that out? Right. And there's people who have spent their whole lives trying to figure this shit out and never end up doing it. So I don't know, kind of what's your take on that?
Enjoying the hunt, enjoying the adventure, you know, that the journey of discovery. I mean, that's for me anyway, because I really like looking for clues and uncovering as much as I can in a way that's exciting to me, where I'm just interested to look into it. And so I get what you mean. But I guess I'm trying to do everything I can to get closer. And the only way that we can really get closer is if we really open ourselves up to it, and make an effort, like with the documentary, you know, that you watched recently regarding Stephen Greer and CE5.
Yeah.
He has a protocol and a way for people to get together to create contact, to enhance and accelerate the possibilities of seeing ships. And so the more that people do that, like that, you're getting accustomed to this idea of working and dealing with extraterrestrial energies. And so that is what accelerates the potential idea of contact, because otherwise, if we can't even believe that there's extraterrestrials, that there's aliens in the sky, how can we ever create this idea of open contact in our realities? Like, it's just too far. It's too far away from where we are. But people are becoming more, especially as the Pentagon releases videos. People are. I think the coronavirus opened up a lot of shit, like where a lot of people's minds. Where I saw memes going around of, you know, well, now that the coronavirus happened, you know, this might as well happen next, and it'll show like UFO landing. So I think that's big, that people are opening to it.
Yeah, I almost got to wonder. So a couple things on that. I found myself so deep in the rabbit hole to where I was like, when Kobe passed away, immediately my first thought was, what did aliens have to do with this? And that's how I knew I was really deep. But
I didn't even think of that.
Obviously I quickly overcame that belief, but I don't know, talking about feeling things, I just feel like what you said, I feel like, especially with the Pentagon officially acknowledging these clips that they released, and if you kind of look at the outlines and like kind of change the contrast, these are flying saucers that they're looking at, right? And like the gimbal video is a clear flying saucer. It's round, and then it's got a little hub in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, what's up?
Literally spins around.
It spins around.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, we get Brian's sighting, which is right here, right where the Phoenix Lights happened. And he's got it right up close. And we showed that.
That was a good one.
Yeah. And I went on a Reddit search and I started looking up different sightings that are recent. I figured if it's going to be anywhere on the internet, it's going to be on Reddit. And people in South America and Australia are uploading video of the exact same thing that Brian saw.
Exact same shit. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's crazy.
Right. Because from my understanding, and this goes along with what I was talking about with the Phoenix Lights, the actual ships, they have to do with they're usually tied a specific type of ship to a specific type of civilization. So when you see one ship and you see another, it ain't the same dude. It's just that it's like the same type of ships. And the Phoenix Lights, and what I would just classify for the sake of making it easy to remember, is the V shape is like that same civilization. So that round shape, I don't know. I haven't looked into that much, but
Brian tried to say it was like a flying saucer turned sideways. And I just feel like, to me, it looked like a sphere, like a concentric circles within each other. And I was like, if I blew that out in the 3D from this 2D video, it would seem like a sphere because it's perfectly circle. Whereas if it was a flying saucer that was turned on its side, depending on your perspective, it would look like eclipse or like an oval type of shape rather than a perfect concentric circles inside of each other. But I don't know, man, it fascinates me, not only the variety of the different types of UFO sightings that there are, but then what more fascinates me is, like what you said, the connections between different ones from people who have nothing to do with each other, who are across the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much evidence now. You just got to look for it. You just got to look at it. And if after all of that you deny it, then
so be it.
It's just not for you. It's not for everybody. It's not. There's some people that they would much rather live their entire life not even thinking that this could exist, that this could happen. And there's more people that are interested in extraterrestrials now. But there's always going to be some people that, like, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because the people that are into this, just like people that listen to you, they find each other, and it all works out, where the people that want to hear it, that want to talk about it, they end up being in the same circles, listening to the same type of things. And I think that's enough to accelerate contact. I think the small, however, and I think there's a lot of people that believe in this stuff. I haven't looked at too many surveys, but I remember looking at, like, seeing different survey numbers, and where like 40% of people believe in it, at least, believe in like extraterrestrial life. I mean, something like that is very significant for the entire population.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, and that's the thing, is you got to look into this, who put on the survey, who was actually surveyed, the demographic. But yeah, man, I feel like, especially with my channel coming on the scene recently, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are just like me, or are just as deep down the rabbit hole. But yeah, man, it's interesting to see how this all pan out.
Yeah, well, that's the excitement of it, is where you don't know exactly where it's going to go. Yeah, and that's the rabbit hole, man. That's the definition of the rabbit hole. You go down and you don't know what's in there, and you don't know how far down it is, and you just keep going.
Yeah. So if there are any copywriters listening to this and you want to check out more of Mike's stuff, go to swiped.co. He's got the biggest fucking resource database of just all the different best converting sales letters you'll ever want. Plus, Mike's a dope guy. You want to shout out your Instagram real quick?
Yeah, it's swiped.co. So it's my website.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we're about 2 hours in, so we might as well just cut it here. Okay. I know you and I say this with a lot of the people who have been on, but we could go on for hours, which just means we'll have to have you on again in the future.
Sounds good, man. I mean, this is the first interview that I've done like this, where it wasn't just about copywriting and business.
Dude, I get so bored. Maybe it's just because I've consumed so much of it, but I can't do that stuff. I have to be able to go anywhere where I want, because I'm so ADD.
Yeah, and maybe also people that watch this, that see you and me and just saw us before as being, the dating guy, the copy guy, they realize that there's more going on here. Yeah, like you could have a business in a niche, but you could also be just as excited or more excited about these other, like, weird things. Like it's fine to be weird. I don't think it's weird. That's the funny part is the more that you like get into this, you feel like it's not weird anymore. And then you're like, I don't even know what I am anymore.
Yeah. And even just like, not even just aliens and UFOs, but like, there's a lot of things I'm interested in: science, biology, sociology, you know, just like how someone become, like the development of people's personalities. Anyways, I think a format like this is perfect because I'm able to go out and venture into whatever I want, but because it's not the dating show, it's the Patrick James's podcast or whatever, we can do that. And I think, honestly, I believe this is the next wave, is like a lot of people are going to be creating podcasts. A lot of people are going to be able to talk about whatever they want. I don't know, but either way, man, I'm excited for that.
No, and that totally like ties into what I believe about this idea of people following people, not just brands, not just this is my brand and this is what I'm going to talk about. It's like your brand is you, and that is the ultimate brand. And if you know enough marketing and if you're savvy enough to sell stuff, you can make a living off of just being yourself. You know?
Yeah. That's the inspirational message of today. Be yourself and you can do what you want. Numerology, UFOs, look into it. All right, guys, we'll see you later.
Do research.